Barbara Walters, Martin Luther King.
Oh hi, it's the next day, it's Monday, and I'm back in school. I can't believe it. The year is almost over. I'll be turning 16 next year. Hell yeah. Fuck yeah, dude. I can't wait until next year. I'll be turning 16. Hell yeah.
In the same year, 1929. That is absolutely insane to think about. The only one of these three who is
Let's
still
have a joint
alive is
for
Barbara,
Guy.
but it's extremely important to note that if not for hatred, prejudice, and injustice, it's likely that perhaps all three of these people would still be alive.
Oh shit.
Perhaps all three of these people would still be alive today. This really is just a reminder of how close to those times we really are, and while we certainly have come a long way, there is always more work to be done. In our number one spot today, we have the wave. On January 15th, 1919, in Boston, there was a huge, massive storage tank that was filled to the brim with molasses. We're talking about 2.3 million gallons of this stuff sitting in this tank, and on that day, the tank broke and sent a 15-foot tall wave of sticky, gooey syrup flowing throughout the city. I panic when I have 1 tablespoon of that stuff because it's so sticky and goopy. I can't imagine the sight of 2.3 million gallons of it coming crashing down. Someone wrote about how the molasses wave hit houses in the area, saying that they, quote, seemed to cringe up as though they were made of pasteboard. While this story sounds silly and wacky, it's actually deadly. Not only did the wave trap and then kill most of the laborers that were nearby, but there were also others in the area who lost their lives as well. In the end, it is estimated that about 150 people were injured in this accident and 21 people lost their lives. On the day of the accident, the molasses was estimated to be moving at about 35 miles per hour. That would genuinely be terrifying. Like, you can't run away from it, you can't escape into a house, there's literally nothing you can do except for try and surf this massive wave of molasses. In the end, after tons of lawsuits, it was decided that the company was to blame for the accidents because their inspections of the tanks weren't thorough enough. There were about 100 settlements made out of court, and the company ended up paying somewhere from $500,000 to $1 million in the end, which is about $16.1 million today. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thank you so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kosolowski, and I'll see you next time. Bye. The oldest of the three being built for Khufu. I don't know how you say his name. I can't speak English right now. I literally think I just had a stroke. A boy named Richard Parker drew the From biological warfare experiments to unethical human experiments. Let's talk about this and more as we look at some secret warfare experiments that the government tried to hide. Starting off this countdown, we have the prisoners. In 1902, American doctors stationed in the Philippines decided to do some experiments on their own. First, they withheld proper nutrition from 29 of their prisoners. They did so in order to induce beriberi, which is a disease caused by lack of vitamin B1. Lack of vitamin B1 can cause difficulty walking, loss of feelings in the hands and feet, and loss of muscle function. It can cause irreversible damage to your nervous system and heart, and they forced these prisoners into this. 4 of the test subjects died as a result. Then later that year, another physician decided to inject 5 prisoners with the bubonic plague. The prisoners had no clue about this, and they became very sick. Then, 4 years later, in 1906, Dr. Richard P. Strong infected more prisoners with cholera. All subjects became sick, and 13 of them sadly died. Most of the tests were done to see what disease they should use in case of biological warfare. In our 9th spot, we have Operation Big Itch. Operation Big Itch was the name given to a number of tests conducted at Dugway Proving Grounds in 1954. The experiments involved testing biological warfare on unexpected fleas. At least this time they used fleas and not real people. So the fleas were loaded into 2 types of munitions and then dropped from the air. After a bunch of trial and error, the operation was a success. Not only could the fleas survive the drop, but they also could still attach themselves onto the hosts, which were guinea pigs.
shit.
These tests were done to see if it was possible to use infected fleas and drop them into an area to make people sick. That's not all, though. In a project known as Operation Big Buzz, they decided to use mosquitoes. In May of 1955, over 300,000 uninfected mosquitoes were dropped over parts of the U.S. state of Georgia. If it worked, they were going to infect these mosquitoes with yellow fever. These two are just some of the entomological warfare tests done in history. In our 8th spot, we have the Edgewood Arsenal drug experiments. Beginning in the 1950s, the Army decided to run some tests on psychoactive drugs and other chemical agents on soldiers. About 7,000 soldiers took place in these experiments, and they were exposed to 250 different chemicals. Some of the chemicals that were tested on them were sarin gas, LSD, PCP, cannabinoids, irritants, and riot control agents. The effects these chemicals and drugs had on the soldiers were studied and noted. In 1975, the tests were canceled after being deemed controversial. In the end, most of the test subjects suffered from psychological trauma and serious health problems. In our 7th spot, we have the Plutonium Experiments. Over the years, the U.S. government has participated in a number of plutonium experiments. One of them involved a man named Albert Stevens. This man was misdiagnosed with stomach cancer and then was told he was going to receive treatment for this cancer. Meanwhile, he was just a test subject. He was injected with plutonium without even knowing. And then they said he was cured. He was led to believe that the treatment had cured him. In fact, he received the highest known accumulated radiation dose ever recorded. It should have been lethal. In the end, the plutonium remained present in his body for the remainder of his life, slowly decaying over the years. He ended up dying 20 years later from heart disease. And his ashes were actually stolen so that they could continue analyzing the radioactivity of this man. But they did this without the consent of his relatives. In our 6th spot, we have the burn victims. In the 1950s, researchers at the Medical College of Virginia performed a number of unethical experiments on burn victims. In particular, they targeted poor black victims. These victims did not give their consent for these tests.
Brown met the problem beautifully.
In particular, they targeted poor period. More than 770 patients were experimented on.
It's another joint.
460 of them were African American. A number of people developed fluid loss and anemia from the severe burns that they were subjected to. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the chemicals. From 1950 to 1953, the U.S. Army conducted a number of experiments over 6 cities in the U.S. and Canada. The tests were to see the dispersal patterns of chemical weapons. So they sprayed chemicals all over these cities. Some of the chemicals being zinc cadmium sulfide, which was thought to not be harmful. One place affected by these sprays was Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada. They were informed that they were testing a chemical fog to protect Winnipeg in the event of a Russian attack. So they said that this fog was going to be a defense study, which was a lie. Although it was said to be a small dose that they were exposed to, in some urban environments, people were exposed to higher levels. And because of how small the size of the particles were, it made it more dangerous according to a scientist, due to the fact that they could get lodged deeper into people's respiratory systems. Thankfully, no one died from the tests, but it's so sketchy how they lied about it all. Like, yeah, we're doing these tests to protect you. Just kidding! In our 4th spot, we have the Holmesburg Program. From 1951 to 1974, a number of dermatological experiments took place in Holmesburg Prison in Pennsylvania. The studies were performed by Dr. Albert M. Kligman on behalf of the U.S. Army, Dow Chemical Company, and Johnson & Johnson. The test started with looking at health effects of dioxin and other herbicides on the human body. So they exposed some patients to these chemicals, and years later, a number of them developed a variety of health problems like lupus. So they actually sued the professor, but that didn't stop him from continuing on with these experiments. In fact, he increased the amount of dioxin that the people were exposed to. He applied 7,500 milligrams of dioxin. That's 468 times the dosage of the first test, which still made people ill. The prisoners developed a number of terrible inflammatory pustules and papules. That's not all, though. In 1967, the U.S. Army paid Kligman to apply skin-blistering chemicals to the faces and backs of inmates so they could learn how the skin protects itself from toxic chemicals in case of attack. One creepy report from Kligman said, and I quote, All I saw before me were acres of skin. It was like a farmer seeing a fertile field for the first time. That's disgusting. In our third spot, we have the Fp45 Liberator, which was anything but liberating. This was a failed weapon that was going to be used by the US military during World War I. Since it was small, it could be made cheaper and more of them could be produced. The plan was to have these weapons airdropped to the soldiers. They then were going to use these weapons to kill enemy troops before stealing their weapons. Plus, they thought that enemies would be intimidated when they see all these weapons being airdropped to them. They wanted to strike fear into them. The US produced 1 million of these weapons, but it was all for nothing. The whole thing was found impractical and ineffective, and a waste of time and money. In our second spot, we have the Dorset Experiments. Between 1953 to 1975, a series of experiments were done to see how far one ship or aircraft could spread a biological warfare agent over the UK. These experiments were referred to as the Dorset Biological Warfare Experiments. Between 1961 to 1968, more than 1 million people along the south coast of England were exposed to E. coli and Bacillus globigi. It was spread by a military ship anchored off of the Dorset coast, spraying the organisms towards them. That was just one experiment out of many. Another one included releasing a bacteria in the London Underground at lunchtime to see how far it would spread. In fact, people close to where the trials took place became very sick. Women miscarried, other kids were born with cerebral palsy or had birth defects. They blame these experiments. And in our number one spot today, we have the Irradiation Experiments. Between 1960 to 1971, the Department of Defense funded a number of radiation experiments. These experiments, again, were conducted without the person's consent and was mainly performed on poor and black patients with cancer. The patients were told that they were receiving a treatment that might cure their cancer, which was a lie. Instead, researchers were seeing the effects that high levels of radiation would have on the human body. Imagine thinking that these doctors were here to help you, but in the end, you were just one big test subject for them. And they weren't helping you. In the end, it made patients worse. Alright guys, that's all for today's video. Yeah, the government is sketchy. What's new? Now let's move on to our comment shout-out portion. I'll be shouting out comments from the video, top 10 real people that are too evil for prison. I don't know why I said it like that. Christina Hernandez commented, dressed like Chucky. Love it, Lindsay. So if you guys don't follow me on Instagram, I made a revelation the other day. I was wearing these overalls and a striped shirt underneath, and I realized I looked like Chucky. And I realized I already filmed a video looking like Chucky, and I already know all the comments are gonna be saying that I look like Chucky, so I called myself out before you guys could, but it was bad. I'm never wearing that top ever again, I swear. Reese Thomas commented, I hope your Monday is going great, Lindsay. Thank you so much, Reese. It was going great. Now it is...
This is a takeover. Wall Street and the ASX now at our fingertips with this right here.
When you reskill, reinvent, reawaken, you define your greatness. Get started now.
Starting off this countdown, we have the pain. Okay, this one is hella freaky, but a number of people have claimed that they felt a weird sensation either just before or after someone close to them has passed. Let's take psychiatrist Bernard Bateman's story for example. Apparently, one day he experienced this weird, strong feeling in his throat. It felt like he was choking. But later that day, he learned that his father had choked to death on his own blood. The time that his dad died was the same time he felt this choking sensation himself. Isn't that crazy? It's freaky. In our ninth spot, we have the dreams. Has anyone here ever experienced night terrors before? If you have, you know how freaking scary they are and how real they feel. Starting off this countdown, we have the pain. Okay, this one is hella freaky, but a number of people, apparently, they'll manipulate your dreams so that's what you're dreaming. Or the demons will play into through your dreams. Either you will have a horrifying reoccurring dream, or there will be a reoccurring. You ever experienced night terrors before? If you have, you know how freaking scary they are and how real they feel. Well, it's said that spirits will try to...
Whenever I kill White, I can summon in my dream. So, if I kill a demon, I can summon it in my dream. I can summon anything in my dream if I kill it in my dream world. Night Tower is not so scary after all if I can summon demons and stuff to attack it for me. They're basically my minions in my dream. Not in real life, of course, but in the dream world. In the dream world, anything is possible. So, yeah, I can summon stuff whenever I want, when I kill it. Let's say if I have a dream about Freddy Krueger. If I kill him in my dream, I can summon him. And yeah, he have to kill. Let's say if I'm having a dream about Slenderman and I summon Freddy Krueger to kill him, he have to do it for me. Then I can summon Slenderman in my dream. They're my minions when I kill them. They obey me in my dream world. My dream world, my rules. My dream world, my rules. Nightmares haven't got control over my dreams. Even night terrors haven't got control over my dream world. I have control. I can summon or do whatever the fuck I wanna do in my dreams. In nightmares, night terrors, normal dreams. You know, the shit.
Communicate with you through your dreams. Malicious spirits or demonic entities, they will torment you through your dreams.
Please.
Either you will have a horrifying
If I kill
reoccurring
them,
dream, or there will be a reoccurring
I can
theme,
fucking
like
summon
death,
them,
murder,
you dog.
name it. Or the demons will play into your biggest fears. Let's say you're deathly afraid of spiders and snakes.
Just
They'll
please.
manipulate your dreams so
If I
that's
kill
what
them
you're
in my
dreaming
dream world,
about.
they
Or
have
even
to follow
worse,
me.
the demon itself will
I am
appear
their
to you
master.
in your dream, being like, I'm coming for you. This has happened in real life to a number of people. Sadly, most of these victims develop insomnia because they're too afraid to sleep. Others have taken their lives because they just can't take it anymore. Moving on to number 8, we have the messages. Imagine receiving a text message, email, or phone call from a deceased friend or relative. Well, a number of people have claimed that this has happened to them. The first story involves a woman named Mary, whose mother died of cancer a couple of years ago. Months later, on Mary's birthday, she received a message on her phone from her mom. When she opened it up, it was a voice note. The voice note was a recording of her mom singing happy birthday. But here's the thing, her mom's phone was deactivated, so how on earth was this message sent? Also, her mom was dead, so animals can be quite cool. When it was previously owned by Edward. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Flickering Lights. Next time you're a spirit that was haunting her house through the flickering of a light bulb. She told the spirit to flicker the light once for yes and twice for no, and through that she was able to talk to the spirit. Moving on to number 4, we have the feathers. Now, I learned this years ago from my friend's mom, and it's always stuck with me. Surprise visit from some furry animals can be quite cool, as long as well, a number of people have claimed that this has happened to them. The first story involves a woman. Demonic entities, they will torment you through your dreams. Either you will have a horrifying reoccurring dream, her phone from her mom. When she opened it up, coming in at number 7, we have the wild animals. Getting a surprise visit from some furry animals
Which I've never
can be quite
joined.
cool, as long as it's like friendly animals like bunnies or rabbits, even deer. Maybe though, every time you talk about your deceased loved one, you notice a bunny hopping in your yard. This could be a sign that your loved one is near, or maybe their spirit is now in that bunny. It's a bad sign, however, if dead animals appear around your house, like dead crows, bunnies, or cats on your doorstep, etc. That's a bad sign. Even dead parts of an animal. In some cases, it could be stray cats or foxes leaving these, or it could be an evil spirit, or it's an omen, someone sending you a sign that something bad is going to happen to you. In our 6th spot, we we have the odd coincidences. Have you ever been going on about your day when you notice some weird patterns or coincidences happening to you? For example, maybe you've been thinking of your deceased grandmother when all of a sudden you get a whiff of her favorite perfume. Then later that day you decide to go buy that perfume and the clerk cashing you out has the same name as your grandmother. That's a sign that she's there with you. But not all coincidences are as pleasant as this one. One guy shared his freaky story with this. So he claims that when he was younger, he almost died after falling into the subway train tracks. But a man in a trench coat ended up saving his life. His name was Edward S. Years later, the boy, now a man, moves into a new house. While exploring the attic, he discovers that it was previously owned by Edward S. But sadly, he passed away after falling down a flight of stairs in the basement. As soon as he learned that his savior lived in the house that he just bought, he started having dreams and visions about him. One of the visions involved seeing Edward getting pushed down the stairs by his neighbor. Immediately, the man was like, okay, I think Edward was murdered by his neighbor. And guess what? In the end, he was right. Edward was sending him signals from the afterlife. It's just crazy how they kind of both saved each other in a way. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Flickering Lights. Next time you're walking home in the middle of the night and the street lights above you start to flicker, maybe take that as a sign to run the hell home. Because spirits have the power to manipulate electricity. They can send signals by flicking lights on and off. So maybe a flickering street light is a sign that you're not alone on that dark, sketchy street. In fact, one woman claimed that she had a conversation with a spirit that was haunting her house through the flickering of a light bulb. She told the spirit to flicker the light once for yes and twice for no. And through that, she was able to talk to the spirit. Moving on to number 4, we have the feathers. Now, I learned this years ago from my friend's mom, and it's always stuck with me ever since. Apparently, feathers are a sign that a spirit is there with you. So if you find a white feather in a spot where it makes no sense to be, then it's a sign that someone is there watching over you. But let's say you find one on the floor next to your down feathered jacket. Well, obviously, the feather fell out of your jacket, so that doesn't count. That's why it said it has to be in a place where it doesn't make sense to be. Here's the thing, though. If you see a black feather, then that's bad. That means that a demon or evil entity is around you. In particular, you should be scared if you find a black feather sticking directly up from the ground by your house. In this case, do not touch the feather and go get yourself cleansed. Coming in at number 3, we have the manipulation of electronics. Like I said before, spirits have the power to manipulate electricity. They also have the power to manipulate certain electrical devices like TVs and radios, and sometimes even battery-powered toys. There are 2 main stories that I want to talk about today. One involves a cursed Elmo doll. One year, a family got an Elmo doll for Christmas, and a spirit clearly took a liking for that red-hugging doll because during the middle of the night, it would speak as if someone pressed it. The doll would all be like, ha ha ha, that tickles, you know? The family decided to take out the batteries, and guess what? The doll would still chuckle and laugh. Dude, I tossed that Elmo out the window so fast. Another family had a similar experience, but this time with a battery-powered train. On a number of occasions, they caught the train moving around their house on its own. Clearly, the ghost was a fan of Tom's and Friends. In our second spot, we have the stank smells. If you've seen the Conjuring movies, then chances are you already know about this point. But it's said that evil spirits or demons can be identified with bad smells like sulfur or rotten eggs. If the smell comes out of nowhere, then leaves out of nowhere, either someone tooted or a demon was just in your presence. Let's take a look at the Pear and Family, the family that the first Conjuring movie was based off of. According to the family, their house would smell like rotting flesh. First of all, how did they even know what rotting flesh smelled like in the first place? Anyway, when Lorraine Warren got a whiff of it, she knew that they were being haunted. And when the smell was coming from Carolyn Perrin herself, Lorraine knew she was possessed by a demon. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Paranormal Activity. A clear sign that someone is with you from the afterlife is if spooky stuff happens around you. Like objects moving on its own, you feel someone's presence by you, you hear voices, doors slam on their own, etc. Now, if this happens frequently and at a certain time, then the spirit might be trying to tell you something. For example, let's go back to the Pear and Family haunting case again. Every morning at 5:15, they would wake up to their bed shaking. Every morning, always at that time. Another example would be the story of Grace. A woman named Grace moved into a home. Every night at 12:43, she would hear loud banging noises and sometimes screaming. Well, back in the day, the owner of the house was killed in her sleep at 12:43 at night. Starting off this countdown, we have the static. There's a lot of stories out there about dead people calling their loved ones. It's freaky how many people have experienced this, just like this next person. So their aunt passed away from a number of health complications. A couple days later at around 7 a.m., her grandma, which was her aunt's mother, got a phone call. The caller ID said that it was their aunt calling. What was weird is that she normally called around 7 a.m. every day. But now since she was dead, they were pretty confused. But they answered the phone and all they heard was static. They believed that it was the aunt trying to get in contact with her mom again. Moving on at number 9, we have Pennies from Heaven. Have you ever heard of the term pennies from heaven? And I'm not talking about the song and movie. Well, some use this phrase to refer to ghosts using coins to communicate with you. Maybe you wake up and find a penny on the ground by your desk and you're like, that's weird, how did that get there? Well, it might have been placed there by a spirit trying to get in contact with you. But why pennies? Well, the copper in which pennies are made up of are considered a conductor for electromagnetic fields, which are said to be emitted by spirits, so it's easy for them to manipulate pennies. A number of people have reported finding random pennies around their house after the passing of a loved one. This could be a sign that they are still there with you and are reaching out. Too bad here in Canada, they discontinued pennies, so whoops. In our 8th spot, we have the doctor. According to this woman named Lauren C., her grandmother was a pediatrician from Puerto Rico, so a lot of people just called her La Doctora. When she passed away a few years ago, she believed that her grandmother reached out and left a note for her and her mom. So they were staying at a hotel when they found a note left on their dresser. The note read, "Contactos con los muertos." I'm so sorry, I know I butchered this, but it means contact with the dead, and it was signed La Doctora. How wild is that? They believed that this was from their grandmother, letting them know that she's still around. In our 7th spot, we have the EVP. EVPs are devices that ghost hunters use to get in contact with spirits. It's like a voice box for the spirit so that they can manipulate this device and use it to form words. Well, a woman named Kimberly H. decided to use one a week after her uncle died. The first thing that the spirit said was John, which is her dad's name. Then it got weirder because the second thing it said was brother. So she believes that she was talking to her uncle who was trying to get in contact with his brother John, aka her dad. Unfortunately, Kimberly was too scared to continue on with the EVP device, so she never got to find out what his message to his brother was. In our 6th spot today, we have Sorry. This story was posted by Absolutely Insane Geek on Reddit. According to him, when his dad was about 15 years old, he decided to use an Ouija board with his friends. As they were calling on a spirit, they actually got in contact with one, and it used the board to spell out the dad's name. The next thing it spelled out was sorry. The spirit was apologizing to the dad because his favorite uncle had recently passed away. In fact, it might have been the uncle himself reaching out to him. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Help Me. This next story comes from Juby Love. So one day she was calling her mom when the call got picked up and all she heard was static. She said hello multiple times, but there was nothing. Then that's when she heard someone whisper on the other end of the line. She listened carefully, and she heard a woman whispering, help me," repeatedly. Now, she freaked out thinking that her mom was in trouble. The call ended, but she kept calling back. A few calls later, her mom answered. She claims that she never got the call until now, since she was out of service.
Let's go find something fit for our friends.
She claims that she never got the call until now, since she was out of service. So who was the woman on the other line that answered the phone and needed help? In our 4th spot today, we have the grandmother's warning. When Christian's family went out of town for spring break and left him alone, he thought, hey, what better time than to use an Ouija board? So he was in his kitchen using the board by himself when all of a sudden the kitchen sink turned on. When he asked who it was that did that, the board spelt out Renee, which was his great-grandmother's name. Then for some reason, the planchette kept moving to the numbers 3 and 4. Well, his great-grandmother was 34 when she passed away. When he told his mom what happened, she freaked out. Apparently, Renee hated Ouija boards, and she was very, very against them. So she thinks that Renee was using the board to warn her family to stop using it. Even with her being dead, she still found a way to scold her family. In our third spot today, we have the Party Phantom. So this next individual, Jess Gals, shared a story on behalf of her friend. Her friend had just moved into a new house and decided to throw a party. While at the party, she had a little too much to drink and ended up leaving some drunken voicemails for her friends. The next day, they all were having a hoot listening to her drunk messages, until they heard something very scary at the back of one. In one of the voicemails, they heard this very scary, aggressive voice yell, "Vivian." A couple of days later, they were talking to their neighbors and found out that the previous tenant of their house was a lady named Vivian. She had died in that house. See, that's why you do your research on the house before you buy it and move into it. You gotta make sure no people die in the house and that it's not haunted.
Yep.
In our second spot, we have the poem. Now, this story is absolutely wild. It was shared by Reddit user Kazurli on behalf of her mom. According to the Reddit user, her mom was very close to her grandmother. Just before she passed away, her gran bought her a book full of poems. When she did pass, she randomly found the book sitting open in plain sight. The book was open to a page called "Do Not Weep at My Grave." From then on, her mom would read her that story every night for months on end until they both felt better about the grandma's passing. Fast forward to